Today marks 1 month since Election Day. I know it feels like it was just yesterday, right? Well, President, as we know, he lost. That's not in dispute anymore. He lost the election, even if he won't admit it. But how much of a force will Donald Trump be after his presidency ends? Is he a legitimate challenger in 2024 as he's threatening? We are a month away from Senate runoffs in Georgia. So where does the race stand, and can we trust the polling there? And just how bad was the polling in 2020? Democrats failing to make gains in the Senate as many predicted, and they actually lost seats in the House in a year most people and most polls expected them to do a whole lot better. For answers to all those questions, we turn to Eli Yokley. Eli, a senior reporter at Morning Consult, and Andrew spoke with him earlier today.
Eli, let's start with President Trump, who's heading to Georgia this weekend to stump for Republicans in the Senate runoffs. You've been looking at his numbers within the GOP. You think it's likely to remain the party of Trump for some time, perhaps all the way into 2024?
We'll see. It sure looks that way today. Now, look, things change, and Donald Trump will carry a different sway with the party when he's not in office. But as things stand, 7 in 10 Republican voters think that Donald Trump's more in touch with the party base than Republicans on Capitol Hill. Clearly, he has some sway among voters right now. They think that Trump is more effective and more committed to the party and the country's best interests. And so that's why this is such a big deal for Senators Perdue and Loeffler as Donald Trump heads down there. This is an important race for the Republican Party. But it's also important for President Trump. You talk to Republican strategists in Washington who will tell you that if you're thinking about a legacy, you're thinking about continued strength among Republican voters and to be able to carry some sway heading into the next couple of years for President Trump. A big deal is being able to prove that you can win after a loss like he had this year. And so him getting down there campaigning for Senators Loeffler and Perdue is a big part of him maintaining his control among Republicans.
Those Trump numbers that you cited prompted a couple of different questions. One, Trump's the best known Republican in the country by a country mile right now. So how much of his support among Republicans is based solely on name recognition? And also, how much is based on sort of the shrinking and self-selecting GOP under Trump as Trump critics left the party and Trump supporters, who might not have been that active, joined the party over the last 4 years?
Well, I mean, as things stand today, over half of Republicans say they would vote for Donald Trump in a Republican primary, a hypothetical contest 4 years from now. This is a hypothetical. This is sort of a measure of where things stand today. But you can read the tea leaves in there, and you see Mike Pence as a sort of second tier contender. Don Jr., Donald Trump's son, is somebody who's also up there pretty high. But you think about a lot of the Republican senators who are going on and carrying the presidential flag for themselves, such as like a Josh Hawley or a Rick Scott. Folks really just don't know who they are yet. And despite all the Fox News hits and all the conservative talk radio and all the Facebook ads that they can buy, it's going to take some time and some effort for them to get known by voters. We've seen Senator Rick Scott of Florida go down to Georgia to campaign. He's the new chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. And so he's going to be working hard across the country for a lot to help get Republicans elected. That's going to be a way that he can get himself to be known. Josh Hawley is really carrying the anti-tech sort of populist mantle for the Republican Party. So there's avenues here for these folks to do it. Right now, though, Donald Trump is such a powerful force in the party, and there's not a lot of oxygen for this kind of stuff. Especially if there's reporting that he's looking at announcing a presidential campaign early. We'll see if that actually happens. But as long as that's hanging over the Republican Party, I think it's probably going to be a challenge for a number of these Republican senators to break through and sort of get a grip on the party.
Let's talk about Georgia a little bit. Haven't seen that much polling on the runoffs so far, and I'm not sure how much people are going to believe the numbers when they do come in. Given everything that's going, first of all, do you have any idea where the numbers are in Georgia? Given everything that's going on there, including the divide over Trump's election, would polling numbers be accurate if we surveyed people in Georgia at this point? And if you saw a poll that had Warnock up 6 or Ossoff up 6, I'm wondering, would you believe that poll?
Look, Georgia polls, by the way, were pretty good in the lead up to the election. Right now we saw some recent polling come out that showed pretty tight races between the two of them. You talk to party strategists on both sides. I was just doing that earlier, and they both see close races down there. It's totally a turnout game. It sounds almost like something you always say, but it really is. In a runoff, this is not a persuasion game. This is not getting somebody to split their tickets. This is getting your party base to totally show up. And there's a question mark over that, just because of all the questions about Georgia's election results that have been raised by Donald Trump and whether that's going to hang over the Republican Party. That's why it's such a big deal that Trump's going down there. This is his first big public event since losing the election, his first big rally. And Georgia Republicans really want it. They want him to get out there and tell people to show up, because you do have concerns about folks driven by Republican messaging being nervous about participating in some of these elections. If I saw a poll that said that there were 10-point spreads in these races, I think I would raise an eyebrow a little bit, because I think both sides of the aisle expect these to come down to the wire next month.
I wanted to ask you a couple of questions just about polling in general in 2020. As somebody who works for Morning Consult, I'm sure you get them all the time. Anybody who reports on poll numbers gets them all the time. Very quickly, there's a thinking that Biden's popular vote, either the polls overestimated his support or Biden underperformed his polling. Is that a fair conclusion based on the numbers and the results?
Well, I know about our numbers, and we had Biden over 50% consistently nationally, and so Biden's numbers look pretty good in a lot of the national polls. We're still reviewing this. Votes are still being counted. I'm sure we'll have more to say in the coming months. Other pollsters have talked about this, and they have raised concerns about being able to reach some of these white, non-college, rural voters who really showed up for Donald Trump. That's going to be something that I think the industry will be taking a look at in the coming months. But with Donald Trump on the ballot, things are a little challenging. We saw 2018, actually. A lot of the polls were pretty good. And so coming up in 2024 or 2022 and 2024, that'll be another big test for pollsters. But I know a lot of them are reviewing this now.
Finally, Eli, a lot of people look at Democratic losses in the House or the shrinkage of the House majority, and they feel like Democrats either underperformed or the polls overestimated. But I read a piece from Ron Brownstein in The Atlantic. Says Biden carried 223 House districts nationwide. Democratic candidates won 222 or 223 seats in the House, almost identical to Biden. Certainly doesn't sound like the Democratic House candidates underperformed. Sounds like they performed exactly where they should.
I think the challenge for House Democrats this year was an expectations game. I mean, we came into 2020 with Democrats talking about taking back seats in the suburbs of Texas. That didn't really pan out. We saw losses in some of these reach districts that Democrats won in 2018 but weren't able to hold on to. 2022 will be a big test in seeing if these midterm dynamics of the president's party losing ground hold. But you talk to Democrats, and they've lost in territory where maybe they shouldn't have been, or at least typically the way the districts were drawn shouldn't have been. One more thing to consider looking ahead is just the fact that redistricting changes a lot. And you're going to see different lines, and it's going to be hard to compare backwards to what we've seen this year. And so there's still a lot of open questions that remain for 2022.
Always fascinating to look behind and always fascinating to look ahead. Eli Yokley is the senior reporter at Morning Consult. Eli, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Andrew. Up next, we will check in on those Georgia Senate races and whether or not Donald Trump's going to help or actually hurt the Republicans trying to keep their jobs.